They say when you marry someone, you marry their family. I married into wealth, privilege, and a man I thought loved me. But on a luxury yacht trip meant to celebrate family, my husband handed me a piece of trash in a gift box and expected me to say thank you. I did, but that was the last time I would ever let him silence me. This story is about finding your voice when someone tries to take it away. If you've ever felt small, make sure you subscribe, because we're all about getting justice. The California sun felt different on the water, sharper and more revealing. It glinted off the polished chrome and gleaming mahogany of the yacht, a blinding glare that seemed to expose everything. I watched the Newport Beach coastline recede, the multi-million-dollar houses shrinking into pastel-colored toys. The air itself smelled expensive, a crisp blend of sea salt, hot fiberglass, and the faint, sweet perfume of the champagne. Everyone but me seemed to be endlessly sipping. My husband Harold's family was scattered across the deck on bone-white leather cushions, their laughter a practiced, melodic sound that rose and fell with the gentle rocking of the waves, but never quite seemed to reach their eyes. I was trying to blend in, a skill I'd been working hard to master for the past 2 years. But the more I tried, the more I felt like a watercolor painting in a gallery of oil portraits, pale, translucent, and out of place. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, detached herself from a conversation about a charity gala in Monaco and glided towards me. She moved with an unnerving smoothness. Her champagne flute held perfectly level, not a single drop sloshing despite the boat's movement. She stopped beside my chair, her shadow falling over me. "Oh, Amanda. Dear," she began, her voice as smooth as the silk of her blouse. Hair, eyes, the same piercing blue as Harold's, did a slow, deliberate sweep of my outfit. "That dress is quite simple, isn't it? A familiar." Prickling heat crawled up the back of my neck. The dress was a linen sundress, the most expensive piece of clothing I'd owned before my wedding, purchased specifically for this trip in a desperate attempt to fit in. Here, next to Eleanor's tailored slacks that probably cost more than my first car. I could see it for what it was, a flimsy, middle-class attempt at elegance. I resisted the urge to tug at the hem. "I was going for comfort," I said, the words sounding weak against the vastness of the ocean. "Of course," she murmured, her lips curving into a smile that was technically perfect but held no warmth. "A sensible choice." She took a delicate sip of her champagne, her eyes already scanning the deck for her next social target. Having assessed and dismissed me in under 30 seconds, her new diamond necklace, a gift from Harold's father, caught the sun. The sudden, brilliant flash sent me tumbling back a year, to a memory so vivid it felt like yesterday. Harold and I were crammed into a tiny booth at an old Italian restaurant in my neighborhood, the kind with red and white checkered tablecloths and years of candle wax dripping down Chianti bottles. He looked entirely out of place in his tailored suit, but he was smiling, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He'd reached across the table, his hand covering mine, and then he was on one knee on the slightly sticky linoleum floor, holding out a ring that seemed to burn with its own internal fire. "Amanda," he'd said, his voice a low, sincere rumble that vibrated through the small table. "I know I have. All this." He'd made a vague gesture that encompassed his car, his family, his entire world. "But none of it means anything without you. You're my anchor. You keep me real." He'd looked up at me, his blue eyes full of earnest devotion. "I'll always take care of you. I'll always make you feel cherished. Always." I'd started crying. Of course. I'd whispered yes. And he'd slid the ring onto my finger. It felt impossibly heavy then. A beautiful, dazzling anchor. Now, standing on the deck of his family's yacht, it just felt heavy. All right. All right. Gather round. Everyone, Harold's voice boomed, pulling me from the memory. He was standing near the bow, a stack of beautifully wrapped gifts at his feet. An expectant silence fell over the family as they rearranged themselves to face him. This was the main event of the afternoon. Harold's annual performance of the generous son and patriarch in training. He absolutely thrived in the spotlight. He started with his father. "Dad," he said, his tone respectful, "for another year of incredible guidance. And for not selling the company when I almost blew that merger in Q2. A ripple of polite laughter went through the family. Harold handed him a heavy, dark wood box. Inside was a Patek Philippe watch, its face a marvel of quiet complexity. His father gave a curt, appreciative nod, the highest form of praise you could expect from him. Next was Eleanor. "And for my beautiful mother," Harold crooned, "who somehow manages to look younger every year." He presented her with the jewelry case containing the diamond necklace she was now wearing. She held it up again for effect, the diamonds drinking the sunlight and throwing it back in 1,000 blinding little rainbows. She kissed Harold's cheek. A perfect, blood-red lipstick print he immediately, discreetly, wiped away. The procession of luxury continued. A carefully choreographed display of wealth and familial duty. His sister, Tiffany, let out a theatrical gasp as she unwrapped a Birkin bag in a shade of blue, so exclusive it had a name I couldn't pronounce, and, apparently, a year-long waiting list. Her husband, Todd, received a case of vintage Bordeaux that he declared was simply unobtainable. Each gift was a statement, a reinforcement of their status and their place within the family hierarchy. I clapped for each one, the sound of my palms stinging slightly. My smile stretched so wide it felt like a mask I couldn't take off. With each unwrapped gift, the champagne in my stomach felt colder, heavier. A nervous flutter started in my chest. I took a deep breath of salty air, trying to calm the frantic monologue in my head. Don't expect anything big. That's not what matters. It's the thought that counts. It's always the thought that counts. I wasn't greedy. I didn't want a handbag that cost as much as a down payment on a house. I just wanted a thought. A real one. Maybe a first edition of my favorite book he'd tracked down. Or a framed map of that disastrous road trip we took through Oregon. The one where we got lost and ended up laughing so hard we cried. Something that said, "I know you." Finally, the pile was gone. It was just me. Harold turned, and the full force of his charismatic smile landed on me. He was saving me for last. The grand finale. For a ditsing moment, I felt a surge of hope. "And for my lovely wife, Amanda," he announced, his voice carrying over the gentle hum of the engine. "The woman who keeps me grounded." He walked over and presented me with a small, perfectly square box, wrapped in silver paper. It looked like a jewelry box. My breath caught in my throat. He was going to give me something personal after all. All eyes were on me. I could feel their collective gaze, a mixture of curiosity, boredom, and judgment. I slid a nail under the ribbon, my fingers feeling clumsy and slow. The paper came away, revealing a dark blue velvet box. It promised something delicate, precious, and chosen with care. I lifted the lid. The world seemed to go silent. The laughter, the waves, The distant seagulls, it all vanished, replaced by the roaring of blood in my ears. There, nestled on a bed of cheap, synthetic felt, was a plastic wristband. It was an aggressive, corporate blue, the kind of freebie they hand out at a tedious conference. In the center, printed in a smudged white font that was already peeling at the edges, was the logo of his family's multi-billion-dollar investment firm. I stared at it, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. I picked it up. It was light and flimsy, with a rough, unfinished edge from the plastic mold. It smelled faintly of chemicals and condensation. This wasn't a joke. A joke would have had a punchline, a real gift hidden underneath. This was just this, an empty gesture, a piece of trash in a velvet box. I could feel the heat flooding my face, a deep, painful blush of humiliation that I knew was visible to everyone. I wanted the deck to open up and swallow me whole. I didn't dare look up, but I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The awkward silence stretched into an eternity. Tiffany coughed, a sharp little sound that was unmistakably a smothered laugh. Slowly, as if moving through water, I lifted my head. Harold was watching me, his expression unreadable at first. But then I saw it, a tight, self-satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It was the look of a man who had just successfully made a point. I flicked my eyes toward Eleanor. She was looking at me with an expression of profound pity, as if I were a child who had just failed a very simple, very public test. That look was worse than the wristband. I closed the box. The soft click was like a gunshot in the silence. "Oh," I said. My voice was a stranger's, a thin, airy whisper. "Thank you, Harold. It's thoughtful." I tried to construct a smile, but my facial muscles refused to cooperate. I pushed myself to my feet, my legs feeling unsteady. The velvet box was clutched in my hand like a piece of damning evidence. "If you'll excuse me," I said, my voice cracking on the last word. "I think the sun is getting to me." I turned and walked toward the cabin, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. I could feel every eye on my back, a physical weight of judgment. I slid the heavy glass door open, stepped into the blessedly cool, air-conditioned interior, and pulled it shut behind me. The solid thump as it closed felt like a cell door locking. I leaned my back against it, finally letting out the breath I'd been holding. My whole body was trembling. I looked down at the box in my hand and then threw it onto the king-sized bed. It landed with a pathetic, soft thud. This wasn't just an oversight. This wasn't a last-minute mistake. This was a statement, delivered with surgical precision in front of the people whose approval I so desperately craved. It said, "You are a promotional item. You are temporary. You are disposable." The door slid open again, this time with a sharp, aggressive slam against its stopper. I flinched, my head snapping up. Harold filled the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking the bright afternoon light, casting the room in shadow. The charming, magnanimous host was gone. In his place was a stranger with a thunderous expression, his jaw tight. He looked down at me, his eyes cold and flat with irritation. "What is your problem?" His question hung in the air-conditioned chill of the cabin, sharp and heavy as a shard of glass. "What is your problem?" It wasn't a question seeking an answer. It was an accusation. My problem was the problem. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, sealed shut with a mixture of shock and shame. He took a step further into the room, letting the door slide shut behind him. plunging the cabin into a dimmer, more intimate light. It made the space feel smaller, more suffocating. "You're embarrassing me, Amanda," he said, his voice a low, controlled hiss. He started pacing. A caged tiger on a plush carpet. "My entire family is out there, and you just walk away. Do you have any idea how that looks?" He didn't wait for me to respond. He was building momentum, working himself into a state of righteous indignation. It was a joke. A stupid, silly joke. "Can't you take a joke? After everything I do for you? Everything I give you? You get bent out of shape over a $2 piece of plastic." He gestured vaguely around the luxurious cabin. "This trip? The car I bought you? The ski house in Aspen you wanted so badly? I give you a credit card with no limit. And you have the nerve to get hysterical over a gag gift?" Each word was a carefully aimed stone, and I felt them hitting their mark, chipping away at the fragile anger that had started to form, replacing it with the familiar, sickening weight of guilt. He was right. I was being ungrateful. I was being childish. I was embarrassing him. I finally found my voice. But it was weak. Trembling. It wasn't about the cost, Harold. It wasn't about the bracelet itself. It was, "You did it in front of everyone. They were all looking at me." He stopped pacing and threw his hands up in the air in a gesture of pure exasperation. "Oh, my God. You are being so sensitive. You're twisting this into some big, dramatic thing when it was nothing. It was a joke that didn't land. End of story. Just drop it." He looked at me, his eyes hard, daring me to continue. And I didn't. The fight went out of me, replaced by a wave of confusion and self-doubt. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was the one who was wrong. The one who couldn't take a joke. The one who was turning nothing into something. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," I whispered to the floor. "I'm sorry." He let out a sharp, satisfied sigh. The sound of a battle won. "Good. Now, fix your face and come back outside. My mother is already asking if you're feeling unwell." He turned and left, leaving me alone in the silent, chilly room with the echo of his words and the bitter taste of shame in my mouth. I sat there for a long time, staring at the velvet box on the bed. I didn't go back outside. I couldn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen. I needed an anchor, a lifeline back to a reality I recognized. I opened a message to my older sister. "Chloe. Something weird just happened." I typed, "Harold gave everyone in his family these amazing gifts. He gave me a cheap plastic promo bracelet from his company. In front of everyone. When I got upset, he said it was a joke and that I'm ungrateful. Am I crazy?" I hit send before I could second-guess myself. My thumb hovered over the screen, expecting a reply in a few minutes. Maybe an hour. But my phone buzzed in my hand almost immediately with an incoming call. It was Chloe. I pressed the phone to my ear, my heart pounding. "Amanda. Tell me everything. Right now," she said. Her voice was a jolt of sanity, no nonsense. Clear. And 1,000 miles away from the suffocating politeness of the yacht. I told her. I recounted the entire scene. From Eleanor's comment about my dress, to the weightless feel of the box. The smudged logo on the bracelet. The pity in my mother-in-law's eyes. And finally, Harold's anger in the cabin. As I spoke, the words tumbled out, shaky and raw. And I started to cry. silent tears tracking down my face. When I finished, there was a moment of dead silence on the line. I could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background of her city apartment. "Okay, listen to me," Chloe said, her voice dangerously calm. "You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. And you are not ungrateful." She took a breath. "That wasn't a joke. Amanda, a joke is meant to be funny for everyone. This was a power move. This was a public statement. He was reminding you, and everyone else, of your place." Her words sliced through the fog of my confusion. A power move. Putting me in my place. The phrases landed with the cold, hard clarity of truth. It was as if she had given a name to the formless, ugly thing that had been coiling in my stomach. The shame began to recede, washed away by a slow, rising tide of clean, cold anger. I wasn't the crazy one. His behavior wasn't normal. "He wants you to feel small," Chloe continued, her voice hardening, "so you'll be more grateful for the big things he gives you. It's a classic manipulation tactic. Don't you fall for it. Not for 1 second." We talked for a few more minutes, and with every word she spoke, I felt my spine straightening. I felt the ground reforming beneath my feet. When we hung up, the tears were gone. My hands were steady. The humiliation was still there. A dull ache beneath my ribs. But now it was overshadowed by a quiet, burning indignation. I waited. I knew he would come back eventually. An hour later, as the yacht began its slow journey back toward the harbor, the cabin door slid open again. Harold came in to change for dinner. He ignored me at first, moving to the closet, his movements stiff and deliberate. The silence was thick with unspoken tension. This was my chance. "Harold," I said. My voice was calm. He paused, his back still to me. "We need to talk about what happened. And this time, I need you to actually listen." He sighed, a long, weary sound, and turned around. He leaned against the closet door, crossing his arms. The look on his face was one of weary patience, as if dealing with a difficult child. "Amanda, I thought we were done with this." "We're not," I said, standing up. "I don't want to talk about the car or the trips. I want to understand why you thought it was acceptable to humiliate me in front of your entire family." I saw a flicker of something in his eyes' surprise. Maybe. He wasn't expecting this calm, direct approach. His usual tactic of blustering anger wasn't going to work, so he changed tactics. His whole posture softened. He dropped his arms and ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up just enough to look distressed. He walked over and sat on the bed, his shoulders slumping. He looked at me with an expression of deep, soul-crushing regret. "You're right," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You're right. I was an asshole. There's no excuse." He looked down at his hands. "But there is a reason." It took a deep breath, as if preparing to confess a terrible secret. "The bracelet wasn't your gift, Amanda. It was never supposed to be your gift. It was a stupid, panicked, a last-second decision because your real gift fell through." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Do you remember Neptune, the fluffy cat on TikTok, the one you're obsessed with? Who lives somewhere in Orange County? You show me videos of him every single night." I stared at him, my anger momentarily forgotten, replaced by confusion. "Yes." "Well," he said, leaning forward. I found the owner. It took weeks. I contacted her. And I offered her an insane amount of money for a private 1-hour meeting. Just you and Neptune. I had it all arranged. She was supposed to meet us at the marina when we docked this evening. It was going to be the grand finale. The perfect, thoughtful gift that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with you. The story was so specific, so detailed, that it knocked the air out of my lungs. She confirmed yesterday. He continued, his voice cracking with frustration. And then, an hour before we set sail this afternoon, she canceled. She sent back the money and said she had a family emergency. I have the emails. I have the Venmo refund to prove it. He scrambled for his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. He turned it toward me. I saw a thread of emails with a woman named Jessica L. and a Venmo transaction history showing a large payment sent, and then a refund received just hours ago. The screen was angled just so, and he scrolled so quickly that I couldn't read the details. But the headlines were convincing. He put the phone down, his face a mask of misery. I was devastated. Amanda. I was furious. Your perfect gift was ruined. And I panicked. I had nothing for you. And when it was your turn, my stupid brain just short-circuited. I had one of those dumb promo bracelets in my bag from a meeting. And I grabbed it. It was an idiotic, terrible reflex. I didn't even think. He looked at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I am so sorry. I was so angry and disappointed that I'd messed everything up that I took it out on you. It was monstrous. My first reaction in the cabin, I was just lashing out because I felt like such a failure. I just wanted to do something special. Something that was just for you. I stood there, speechless. I wanted to believe him. Every part of me desperately wanted to believe this elaborate, heartbreaking story. It explained everything. It turned him from a casual sadist into a flawed, loving husband who had simply made a terrible mistake under pressure. I forgive you, I said, the words coming out automatically. He surged to his feet and pulled me into a hug, burying his face in my hair. Thank you, he murmured. God. Thank you. I'll make it up to you. I promise. I let him hold me. My body wriggled at first. Then slowly relaxing into his embrace, it felt like the crisis had been averted. But as we stood there, a small, cold thought wormed its way into my mind. He had explained the bracelet, but he hadn't really explained his reaction, even if his plan had fallen apart. What kind of person's first instinct is to deliberately and cruelly humiliate the person they claim to love? The doubt was a tiny, dissonant note in the symphony of his apology, a note I couldn't quite ignore. We went home later that evening, the carefully constructed peace holding between us. We went to bed in silence. Just as I was about to drift off to sleep, the darkness was pierced by the bright glow of his phone on the nightstand. Un moment later, my own phone buzzed. A new message. It was from Harold. I opened it. I love you so much. Don't ever doubt that. I stared at the words on the screen. It should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It didn't feel like a reassurance. In the silent darkness of our bedroom, it felt like a command. I stared at the words on the screen until the backlight dimmed and the screen went black, plunging the room back into darkness. I love you so much. Don't ever doubt that. It wasn't a whisper of affection in the dark, it was a line drawn in the sand. A command disguised as comfort. The carefully constructed piece from his apology felt suddenly, irrevocably, Like a lie. I didn't sleep much for the rest of the night. My mind turning his words, his actions, and his elaborate story over and over again, searching for a truth I felt but couldn't yet prove. The next morning, the trip officially ended. The yacht docked, and the flurry of activity as the staff unloaded luggage covered the tense, brittle silence that had settled between Harold and me. The drive home was worse. He gripped the steering wheel of his Mercedes, his knuckles white, his eyes fixed on the freeway ahead. The radio was off. I watched the sprawling, sun-bleached landscape of Southern California slide by. The palm trees and strip malls feeling like scenery from a movie I was no longer a part of. The air in the car was thick with things unsaid. He was waiting for me to break the silence, to offer up another apology for my sensitivity, to smooth things over and restore the comfortable equilibrium of our marriage. I said nothing. I just kept my eyes on the window, feeling the miles accumulate between the woman I was on that yacht and the woman I was becoming. We had to make one last stop at his parents' estate in Laguna Beach to drop off some of his father's things. While Harold was in the garage with the chauffeur, I carried a small cooler bag into the house. The place was silent, the cavernous marble entryway echoing with the soft click of my sandals. I was heading back out when I passed the open door to Harold's father's study. Eleanor was inside, her back to me, speaking softly into the phone. No, it's fine now. Harold handled it. She was saying, her voice a low, confidencial murmur. There was a pause. I froze, my hand hovering near the front door. I knew I should leave, but I couldn't make my feet move. Well, you know how she can be. Eleanor continued with a sigh that dripped with condescension. A bit emotional. It was all a misunderstanding over a silly little gift. But she made quite a sheen. Honestly, I don't think she's built for this kind of pressure. She's a bit emotional. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. It was the exact same narrative Harold had used. It was their official story. The one they told themselves and each other to explain away his cruelty and my reaction to it. I wasn't a person with valid feelings. I was a problem to be handled. An emocional, unstable element that threatened the perfect, polished facade of their family. I backed away from the doorway silently, my heart hammering against my ribs, and slipped out the front door before she could see me. I was back in the car. Seat belt buckled. Before Harold even came out of the garage, I didn't say a word. I had my confirmation. I was, and always would be, the outsider. When we finally got back to our own house, the silence was a relief. I went straight upstairs to our bedroom and started to unpack the simple, mundane task, a welcome distraction. As I emptied my weekend bag onto the bed, a flash of corporate blue caught my eye. The plastic wristband, it had gotten tangled in a sweater. I picked it up. It felt even cheaper and more insulting in the soft light of our bedroom than it had under the harsh glare of the sun. It wasn't just a piece of plastic. It was a symbol. It was a message. Sent loud and clear, this is all you are worth to me. The cat story. The emails. The frantic apology it all replayed in my mind. But this time, filtered through the lens of Eleanor's words. It was a performance. A masterful one. Designed to manage the emotional, hysterical wife. To fix the story, not the wound. I walked to the window, the bracelet still in my hand, and dialed Chloe's number. She answered on the second ring. Hey, you okay? She asked immediately. I have a question for you, I said, my voice steady. This wasn't a call for comfort. This was a call for clarity. And I want you to be brutally honest. Even if the cat story is 100% true. Let's assume it is. Does that make his first reaction the gaslighting? The anger. Telling me I was ungrateful while I was standing there completely humiliated. Does that make it okay? There was a pause on the other end of the line. But it wasn't a pause of hesitation. It was the thoughtful silence of someone choosing their words with absolute precision. Amanda, she said, her voice clear and firm. Listen to me very carefully. A good man who messes up tries to fix your pain. A manipulator who messes up tries to fix his story. Which one is Harold? The question landed with the force of a revelation. It was so simple, so piercingly true, that it cut through all of my confusion, all of my self-doubt, all of the excuses I had been making for him for 2 years. He had never once asked me how I felt. He had never once tried to understand my pain. His entire frantic, elaborate apology was about him, his failed plan, his disappointment, his reputation. He was fixing his story. A profound, chilling calm washed over me. The decision, which had seemed so monumental and impossible just hours before, now felt simple. It was the only choice I had left. Thank you, Chloe, I said softly. That's all I needed to know. We hung up. I stood at the window for a long time, watching the sun dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I finally felt quiet inside. Later that evening, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from Harold. Thinking of that place in Malibu for dinner tonight. Tisanling. I looked at the message, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anxiety. No obligation. No fear. I set the phone face down and continued making myself a cup of tea. A few minutes later, it buzzed again. His name flashed on the screen. An incoming call. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. The strategic silence felt powerful. It was a space I was creating for myself. A bubble of quiet in the constant noise of his expectations. The texts started to come more frequently then. Babe, everything okay? Are you still mad about the gift? I already said I was sorry. I thought we were past this. Amanda, this is childish. Just call me back. Each message was a small, desperate attempt to pull me back into the old dynamic, to make me the unreasonable one. But his words had no power over me anymore. I watched the notifications pile up with a strange sense of detachment. He wasn't trying to connect. He was trying to control. I opened the Notes app on my phone. My fingers moved surely across the keyboard. I wrote and deleted and rewrote. Not out of uncertainty, but out of a desire for precision. I would not be emotional. I would not accuse. I would simply state the truth that his own actions had revealed to me. I stripped away every mention of the bracelet, the yacht, his family. I boiled it down to the one irrefutable fact. When I was done, I read the words one last time. They were calm, firm, and final. I copied the text. I opened my messages. The long thread of our life together scrolling before me. I pasted my message into the box. Harold, thank you for clarifying about the gift. But your initial reaction when I was hurt, telling me I should be grateful while I was being humiliated, showed me who you really are. This isn't the partnership I want. I'm ending our relationship. My thumb hovered over the send button. This was it. The point of no return. A deep, shuddering breath escaped my lungs. It was a breath of fear, but also of a wild, exhilarating freedom. I pressed send. The little blue bubble shot across the screen with a quiet whoosh. Done. An immediate wave of nausea and relief washed over me. I sank into a kitchen chair, my phone lying face up on the table in front of me. The delivered receipt appeared instantly. I'm LIVID. It was replaced by the 3 little dots of the typing indicator. He was writing. The dots appeared, vanished, then appeared again. He was writing a long reply. He was starting over. He was crafting his next story. My phone buzzed. The vibration loud in the silent kitchen. A long block of text from Harold filled the screen. The preview at the top of my phone, all I could see without unlocking it, showed the very first line of his response. After everything I've done for you, this is how you... My breath caught in my throat. I sat there in the silent kitchen, the phone glowing on the polished granite countertop. The first line of his text, a stark, black and white indictment. After everything I've done for you, this is how you... It was the opening salvo in a war I suddenly knew I could not, and would not, fight. My only winning move was not to play. My thumb, acting with a will of its own, slid across the screen, unlocking the phone and revealing the full, unvarnished contents of his message. My eyes scanned the wall of text. Each sentence, a new layer of manipulation peeled back, exposing the raw, ugly mechanics of our relationship. The message began, as I expected, with a detailed accounting of his generosity. He listed the car, the vacations, the designer clothes, the down payment he'd given my parents for their new roof. Every gift, big and small, was weaponized, transformed from an act of love into a debt I was now defaulting on. He painted himself as the magnanimous, long-suffering husband and me as the spoiled, ungrateful child, throwing a tantrum because she didn't get the one toy she wanted. Then, the tone shifted. When the guilt-tripping didn't elicit an immediate, groveling response, it morphed into pure, narcissistic rage. He called me childish, overly emotional, and mentally unstable. He claimed he had been walking on eggshells for our entire marriage, terrified of my next meltdown. He insisted his family had warned him about me, about my background, and that he, in his blind love, had foolishly defended me. It was a masterful performance. A final, desperate attempt to rewrite reality, to paint me as the villain of a story he could no longer control. I read it all with a strange, clinical detachment. The words were cruel, but they were no longer sharp enough to cut me. They were just data, information confirming a hypothesis I had been too afraid to voice. And then, I reached the end. The final 2 sentences, the knockout punch he'd saved for last, designed to hit me where he knew I was most vulnerable. Good luck finding anyone else, Amanda. Because no real man is ever going to respect someone who clearly doesn't respect her own body. The words landed, for a single, white-hot second. They found their mark. It was a low blow, a deeply personal attack referencing insecurities I had shared with him in moments of profound trust. Moments I now saw were just him gathering ammunition. A sharp, stinging pain flared in my chest, the familiar shame threatening to rise up and choke me. But then, something miraculous happened. The pain vanished. As quickly as it had arrived, it was gone, extinguished by a wave of something so unexpected, so profoundly peaceful, that it felt like taking a breath of clean, cold air after being trapped in a smoke-filled room. It was the feeling of absolute certainty. The mask wasn't just slipping, it had been incinerated, The charming, flawed husband who made a mistake, the man who just wanted to give me a special gift, was gone. The man who wrote this text, this cruel, vindictive, manipulative stranger, was the real Harold. He had just handed me the one thing I didn't know I needed: undeniable proof. The final, missing piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and the entire ugly picture was now perfectly, terribly clear. He wasn't trying to fix his story. He was trying to destroy mine. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was a genuine one. It was the smile of a prisoner who has just been handed the key to her own cell. He thought he was delivering a fatal blow, but he had just given me my freedom. He had confirmed, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that leaving him was the single kindest thing I could ever do for myself. The frantic, anxious energy that had been thrumming beneath my skin for 2 years simply dissolved. The tension in my shoulders eased. My breathing, which had been shallow and tight, deepened. I felt a sense of calm settle over me that was so complete. It was almost holy. I looked at his message one last time. I did not type a reply. There was nothing left to say. My silence was the only answer he would ever get. With a steady hand, I held down the power and volume buttons, capturing a screenshot of the entire damning conversation. I saved the image to a secure folder. A small piece of insurance for my own peace of mind. Then, I navigated to his contact information. My thumb hovered over the words "block this caller." There was no hesitation. No flicker of doubt. I pressed the button and confirmed it on the pop-up screen. His picture vanished, replaced by a generic gray icon. The thread of our life together was severed. It was that simple. I sat in the quiet kitchen for another minute, letting the silence wash over me. Then I stood up and walked upstairs. I went into our walk-in closet. The rows of clothes and shoes he'd bought me standing like silent witnesses. I ignored them. I walked to the small dresser where I kept my sweaters and found the weekend bag I had just unpacked. Tucked into a side pocket was the plastic wristband. I pulled it out and held it in the palm of my hand. The Chekhov's gun of my marriage. It looked so small, so insignificant. It was no longer an object of humiliation. It was just a thing, a piece of cheap plastic that perfectly symbolized the man who had given it to me, shiny on the surface, mass-produced, and ultimately, worthless. I walked into our bathroom, the one with the marble countertops and gold fixtures. I held the bracelet over the small, silver wastebasket. I didn't crush it in my fist or tear it apart in a fit of rage. I simply opened my hand and let it drop. It landed on a discarded cotton ball with a soft, unsatisfying little clatter. And then it was gone. Just another piece of trash. I knew the coming months would be difficult. There would be lawyers, his family, with their immense resources and pristine reputation, would close ranks. They would undoubtedly try to paint me as a gold-digging, unstable villain. Let them. I had my proof. Not for a court. Not for the world. But for myself. That was all that mattered. The lesson settled into my bones. A piece of hard-won wisdom. Respect wasn't a bonus you earned with good behavior. It wasn't something to be grateful for. It was the price of admission. And he had never been willing to pay. I went back into the bedroom and pulled a single suitcase from the top of the closet. I didn't pack the designer clothes or the expensive jewelry. I packed my old jeans, my favorite worn-in t-shirts, the books I'd had since college, and the small, framed photo of Chloe and me on my nightstand. I packed the things that were mine before I ever became his. When I was done, I zipped the suitcase and placed it by the door. I took one last look around the beautiful, opulent room that had been my gilded cage. I felt no sadness, no regret, only a profound sense of release. I pulled out my phone and dialed Chloe's number. She answered before the first ring finished. "It's over," I said, my voice clearer and stronger than it had been in years. "It's really over." "I'm on my way," she said. "No questions asked." I walked downstairs, my suitcase rolling softly behind me on the hardwood floors. I didn't look back. I walked out the front door, leaving the key on the entryway table, and pulled the door shut behind me. Not bothering to lock it, there was nothing left inside for anyone to steal.